everyone. My name is Emily Schmid, and I am the Education Programs Manager here at the National Theater Foundation. And I'm joined today with Julianne Brienza, who is the founding director of Capitol Fringe Festival. So we're going to have a conversation about DC Fringe and everything that goes into that, and a little bit of her professional journey as well. So with that being said, I do have her bio here. So Julianne Brienza is a Montana native, and just this year is a DC resident for over 20 years. Brienza is the founder of Capitol Fringe, which is an arts nonprofit with a mission to celebrate cultural democracy and art for everyone, with the aim to challenge perceptions, shake up the institutionalized hierarchy, and serve as a launching pad for unseasoned and established artists. For nearly 2 decades, Julianne has guided Capitol Fringe's vision, its evolution, and community development. And under her leadership, Capitol Fringe has won numerous awards, including 2 Washington, D.C. Mayor's Arts Awards and the Washington Business Journal's Nonprofit of the Year. Julianne is a recipient of the Helen Hayes Award for Innovative Leadership in Theater and Washington and D.C. Mayor's Arts Award for Visionary Leadership. So with that all being said, Julianne, would you like to introduce yourself and then maybe just go ahead and tell us a little bit about, bio is only a very, scratch the surface of the work that you do. And so I'd love to know just a bit about your journey in the performing arts fields and kind of how you came to DC and how you came to found Capitol Fringe.
All right. Well, I graduated from college with a theater degree. My focus was in performance. I also had a minor in philosophy and visual art. And probably like a lot of other folks that graduate with theater degrees, where you're taught that, you gotta go to New York and, be poor and, that whole scene. I didn't know what to do. So I lived in my sister's basement in Chicago for a fair bit of time. And then I went to Iowa and worked in a newspaper. I ran a political campaign for a man running for the Iowa legislature. So learned a lot of graphic design skills at the newspaper and a lot of organizing skills from running a political campaign. And then I was like, I got to use my degree. Like, what am I doing? Right. So I ended up applying to paid internships and apprenticeships all over the country because I'm not independently wealthy. I cannot go do an internship where I don't make money. And thankfully, this was like before our current time where everything is online. I got hired over the phone for the Art and Theater Company apprenticeship program in Philadelphia, which is a great program that still exists to this day, where you're taught to run a nonprofit theater in about 9 months. You work 80-hour weeks, and you work in every department of the theater. You have to understudy a show. You have to stage manage a show. You have to build the sets, clean the toilets, all the things. And I loved it. I was really, I had always sort of wanted to have like my own company, was something I was very much excited about. So that was a great way to really learn very quickly, and also have health insurance and receive a paycheck, which is awesome. And that's where I also started my 401k, which is a great thing to do when you're like, I think I was 25 when I did it. Then I got done with that and I worked in regional theater, primarily in the regional theater system in Philadelphia, which I thought, and I still kind of think to this day, like the business model is so flawed. And I found it really frustrating with the high person, like this one person making $200,000 or $500,000 and everyone below them making less. And I was like, there's surely got to be a better way. So I decided I didn't want to work in theater anymore. So I once again applied for jobs everywhere and got hired at a arts incubator in Washington, D.C. called Flashpoint. And I moved here to DC where I live today. And I did that job for about 1 year and 9 months. My goal was to have a job for 2 years because that's what my resume needed. I needed longevity. But when I moved here, I tried to get into theater and know about theater. Again, this is before Facebook and all the things that we use to connect now. And I found it very difficult. It was a very insular community. And I had worked the Philly Fringe when I lived in Philadelphia, whether it be box office, venue management, performing in shows. And it was a great time where the whole community came together and was really not fancy or inaccessible for a price point. And I was like, that's what DC needs. DC needs a Fringe festival. That's where everyone could come together. And one, I'd be able to meet everybody, and everyone could sort of mingle and take in theater shows that are not at a price point that are inaccessible to most of us working in theater and many other people that want to go to theater. So a group of us got together, and that's when the festival started. The journey of doing the festival, because we're now in our 18th year, has been DC theater has gone through a lot of changes during that time. When Fringe started, we were paying people $15 an hour to work the festival, which at that time was more than that. But that's what I was getting paid when I was doing light hangs and stuff when I lived in Philly. So I didn't know any better. The Fringe, when it first started, created a lot of theater companies that some still exist to this day in the DC region, some do not. But it was a catalyst for things sort of popping up outside of the regional theater system. And that was great at the time. As things have ebbed and flowed, and we have gone through a global pandemic, it is interesting to see where we're landing, which I think just as a community, whether it be a theater community here or across the globe, we're all kind of still trying to figure out where we're going to land. But I think it's important to know that, like, I grew up in I started doing theater when I was 3. Like, it's really the only thing I've ever done. Like, I was in my first play when I was 3, and that's been like my thing. It's something that you do have to be a jack of all trades to really become, like, that's your sole source of income. And that is also very much the way I view my role as founding director or executive director, or whatever form I have to fill out to do a title. I do the books. I have a bookkeeper and an accountant. I have a development consultant, but I'm sort of doing all of the different strands to make sure the company can continue forward, which is challenging in this time, because what Capital Fringe and what Fringe offers to artists across the globe is no gatekeeping. And that is something that is really important to me, because I feel like, yes, I am a white woman and I had privileges, but I also came from a small town in Montana, and getting into certain arenas, especially on the East Coast within theater, was not always accessible to me. And I want to make sure that if someone is passionate and interested in creating a show and doing a show, that we can afford them that opportunity. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you offer to DC artists is really invaluable. And I love, as a part of your journey, that you're like, I didn't see it here, so I made it, which I think is great. I was wondering if you could explain to folks, if they're not familiar, what Fringe is, and then how it operates in its specificity in DC in general.
Yeah, so Fringe originated in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1947, when the locals were not allowed to take part in the international festival that was happening. And so they did shows wherever they could, bars, churches, alleyways, like whatever. And a journalist named Robert Kemp wrote in The Scotsman, which is still actually a physical paper to this day, that the big international festival was getting fringed. And those theater artists took that and created the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, which is actually what it's called. It's not the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, because in order to be a fringe, an actual fringe, you need to be in opposition to something. And so the Edinburgh Festival Fringe is in opposition to the international festival. So somewhat, that was like almost 80 years ago. So the Edinburgh Festival Fringe is actually quite mainstream now. It's actually quite expensive to do. And all of the tenets that it was founded on, I think, at least in the conversations I've had with festivals around the United States and in Canada and the globe, there's questions about the affordability and actual access to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. In the US, we have about 27 Fringe festivals. All really operate on first come, first serve or a lottery system. You pay a fee, you're given a venue, and you receive either 100% of the ticket revenue or a certain percentage of the ticket revenue. Canada has a little bit of a different model where you apply, it's like the country. So you apply to the country application and then you're selected through a lottery to go to the various festivals, whether it be Winnipeg, Edmonton, Toronto. I don't think that Vancouver's happening this year. But the purpose of it is to give artists access to do shows where they may not be able to afford a venue or something like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's really an opportunity for independent or up and coming artists to produce something if they don't have.
The key thing is, because sometimes when people are applying to Capital Fringe, like reading comprehension is a thing, so they'll be like, where do I send my script? And it's like, no one wants to read your script. Like, we don't have time. Like, we ask for a 20-word synopsis of the story that's happening in the show. And then I always ask a question of like, why are you doing theater now? Because I like to hear how they say that, and then a lot of the other questions are about like technical needs, what they need, if they need front projection, rear projection, because everything is really basic lights and sound. The whole focus of Fringe is really about the performers and the story being told, which sometimes I kind of regret just on a like global level, because I feel like theater technicians really need a place to shine. So I do often think about like, I wish it's not even necessarily monetary resources, it's really time. Because in order to tech a show, there's time to do that and to get all the cues in the light board and all that kind of stuff. But yeah. Yeah,
and the way, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way these shows operate, it's like real short runs, right? For a couple weekends.
Yeah, we do. Well, we're doing it kind of different now after COVID. So it's an 8-day festival now. So it's Thursday through Sunday, then Thursday through Sunday. And artists can have a maximum of 5, and the minimum can only be 3, because no one needs to do a show twice. Like, you're not going to get any attention. So yeah, it's pretty short.
What makes for a good application to Fringe? I know you're just finished your review process for this year. Is that correct?
I mean, we're in it right now.
You're in it right now. Okay.
I'll be done with that like on Friday, if all goes well. Honestly, just writing clearly. Like, we're not judging on ideas or anything like that. It's just the ability to write out what you're doing in a way that we're able to comprehend and know if we can accommodate what the vision is. Because a lot of times folks apply, like we had this show, I'm not going to tell you the name, but we had a show that applied this year that literally had a cast of 22 people and a crew of 20 people. Like, you have not thought this out. like who is managing these people? Like, it just was like, so really making sure that when you apply to a Fringe festival, you've thought through how it's going to actually physically occur is key, so that you know the right things to ask for you to technically do your show. Like, if there's something that's really critical, like you really need a special, like you can't envision the show without a special, or you really need a backstage area that's right off the stage. Stuff like that really matters in applications for us.
I'm sure you have learned a lot from just your time, and you mentioned that internship that sounded pretty intensive. You probably got to see all kinds of technical needs, and not, you can get really creative about the staging of things. Um, is there any particular show from your time in Fringe that really stands out to you, or something that you're really proud of over the past 18 years that Fringe has been able to foster in the DC area?
I mean, one of the things that I'm really proud of, and I'm also really proud of our community, because they're really the ones that made it happen, was for probably like a decade, we did a tent bar outside, mainly because DC was at a different time, and honestly, we could get away with it. So we used to put up this like 3,000 square foot tent where one side was an ADC theater and the other side was a bar. And we got a liquor license and all the license stuff was good. But we would go to like 2 or 3 in the morning, which our liquor license allowed, but like technically in the District of Columbia and like most places, you can't have amplified noise past 10:30 at night, but we would totally just go till, and sometimes the cops would come, but not all the time. And it was a really great thing where you had, because DC is I don't know, it's just very wealthy, and there's a lot of like highly privileged people here, and you would have those people and people that were outside of that group that would mingle together and talk about the shows and take in some random band that was playing in the tent late at night. And to me, that was those were really great moments for our community. Last year when we came back with the festival, we didn't have a bar, mainly because I didn't want to deal with like masking and like what is that at a bar, like that just seems horrible to deal with. But we are bringing the bar back this year, so I'm really excited to be able to, because a lot of the festival is really about the community coming together, whether they're seeing shows or meeting people after shows or whatever it is. It's about having that younger artist meet patrons that go to regional theaters throughout the year and making connections and that sort of stuff that really makes it feel more like a community, and that we're all in this together and not the division of the 8 large regional theaters in the District of Columbia taking all the resources and not sharing. Yeah. So I think that's the thing I'm most proud of. I don't know, the shows, this is maybe bad to say, but like I often don't go to a lot of the shows because
There's so many.
Well,
and
and I'm working, and like my focus is really on making sure the venues are just able to handle the flow of people and not have technical issues, and that the staff is, if they're having a longer day, that they get food, or like that kind of stuff is important. That's kind of what I focus on. Probably if I was more of like an artistic director type person, I would go to the shows and have those types of conversations, but that's not necessarily my role at Fringe per se.
I've actually even I've talked to a couple people that are artistic directors, and they're like, most of this job is paperwork or is that day-to-day management of like, making sure that everything happens so that the art can happen.
Yeah.
And so I wonder for you, because you have this background, your educational background in acting, how do you, for yourself, both like personally and professionally, balance some of this? Because I'm also an arts administrator, and so that's something I work with in my professional life as well, is how do I balance, artistic and creative interests while also doing the management and doing everything that needs to happen in order to put all these shows on?
I mean, it's ebbed and flowed over the years, but I think the one thing that I have kept doing, because I can't imagine not doing it, is I create the graphic image for the festival every year. And so I go to great lengths to make sure it's like right. And we've had a lot of great, years where we had like the paint year where we poured paint over people and took photos and then poured paint over everything because we were in a vacant building, so we could. This year our theme is lemons, and at the festival we're going to sell lemonade, and a lot of the Georgetown restaurants and bars are also going to sell lemonade just to celebrate the festival. And I also think it's a time where we should just be making lemonade out of lemons. So
Yeah.
I think on all sorts of fronts. Yeah, there is, I think when I was younger, I sort of struggled with that a lot more. Maybe when I didn't have like a good work-life balance. Because like honestly, when Fringe first started, it was a lot. I remember in 2007, which was our second year, I was like, well, maybe if I just like work all night, like if I work for like 24 hours straight, I will get through all of this and it'll be better. So I did that. It was not drug induced. I literally just worked 24 hours. And when I got done with that, I was like, that was dumb because everything I did created more work. Every email I replied to, I would get a response. Like it was just, and so I think a lot of it is about making sure that there's a good work-life balance, which I think when I was younger, I didn't have a very good concept of what that meant. I thought that meant like, oh, I'm not working now. That's my balance. But it's actually about being able to do other things outside of work, which I know sounds very rudimentary, but that was definitely a struggle in my 30s when I was like, I'm just like working all the time. Yeah, so I actually think doing the finances and making sure, like I just got our 990 done. And I think there's a real art to making sure that, because I really believe in telling our story in our 990. Like I want people to look at our, I mean, I don't know, I look at 990s, but to be able to tell like what actually occurred in that year. And so I always try to make sure that I add all the right notes, and there's an art to doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Your fellow, nonprofit theater nerd over here. But for our high school students who might not know, could you explain what Form 990 is?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so as a nonprofit, you have to get an audit every year if you're of a certain budget size, which I think is like 500,000. And then for the IRS, because nonprofits don't pay taxes, which is great, but in order to do that, you have to get audited every year. So you have to hire an auditor, and they're expensive. Like our auditor this year was like $7,800. I know other people pay more. But the 990 gets filed with the IRS to verify that you're not, taking the money and going to the Bahamas and committing fraud or, doing stuff like that. And then that 990 is a permanent record that you share with your funders, but it's also all 990s can be looked up on a thing called GuideStar, which you have to set up an account, but it's free. And you can go and you can look up how, like the top person, how much they're paid, what their bonuses are, all of that stuff, which is a really good education thing when you're looking for jobs to, see what kind of culture you're getting into.
Yeah, you talked about how you got a little bit fed up with regional theater management culture. And so I'm wondering for you, what some of the joys and challenges have been of starting your own nonprofit and kind of doing this countercultural thing that is a little bit different than maybe your more traditional theater nonprofit model, nonprofit theater model.
One thing, okay, well, there's a couple of things that so with regional theaters, there's always like a subscription model or like a membership thing. And that's how people like if you donate a certain amount, you can then go to like an invited dress rehearsal or an opening night or stuff like that. Since starting Fringe, I think 1 year I got talked into doing like levels for donations. But what I found with that is that it was just setting up a hierarchy system for our donors. And the whole point of our mission is that there is no hierarchy. So we don't do that, even though people ask me about it all the time. The other thing is, which is challenging and kind of ebbs and flows depending upon the staff, but especially coming back after the pandemic, the core staff that works on the festival, there's 4 of us. We actually don't have titles. Like when we hire the venue managers and the box office staff, and I have this little document that has like a little photo of everybody, and then it describes what we do and what our focus is. Because many of us have multiple focuses because of our skill level, right? But we're not called a certain thing. We're just called our own name. And you can say that that's like hokey or whatever and silly. And it wouldn't work in other arenas. I understand that. But I find in our environment, it actually is helpful to dealing with artists that it may be their first professional experience, also with staff that we hire on as venue managers, which many times that's their first job in theater in DC, that it's just a different environment than they'll find anywhere else in the city, but it's a little bit more welcoming. And I also am very strong about people having autonomy and not having it be like, we have to do it this way. This is the only way to get to the end goal. Which some of that stuff can be challenging, and you have to kind of step in just depending upon the personalities in the room. But so far it's been okay. We've made it. Yeah.
I think it's great that you're carving out a space like that in a city that is very interested in hierarchies and titles.
Yeah, I remember when Fringe first started and like business cards were like a big thing. And I got like a business card that was just like generic so that everyone had the same business card because I thought it would be more cost effective. But like some people on staff at the time were like, well, I need to have my title on there. And I was just like, do you? Like, is it really necessary? So we still have, I actually have one right here. We still have the business cards with nobody's, you just scan it and it goes to our little, like our website. Just because that's not really our mission. Our mission isn't, well, I will say sometimes I do question that since I've been doing this for so long, right? This is 18 years. And I oftentimes think that Fringe would probably have more money, more whatever, if I was really into like being a superstar. Like I was one of those, there's certain executive directors and stuff that like go out more, go to every event, make sure all of that stuff is lined up. But that's just not who we really are. That's not that's not the Fringe mission. Yeah.
I mean, I think that brings up another just kind of important point, though, is that, a nonprofit is really in service of its mission, versus its bottom line. And so you, as the director, get to make decisions that are in service of that mission.
Yeah, which a big decision that we made coming back from COVID. So pre-COVID, so when we started Fringe, the artists got like 60% of the ticket revenue from their show. And then just with like life, it got whittled down to about 58%. 2019, the last time we did the festival pre-COVID. And then in coming back this year in 2022, I was like, we got to go back. This has to be better because like no one has money. Like, so we now do 70% of the ticket revenue back to the artists, and it's hard. That means that Fringe makes $4.50 on a ticket. It's laughable in 2023. And I also lowered the ticket price to $15 because the reality is a patron could come to a show and it could be the worst thing that they've ever seen in their entire lives. And how can they complain to you? They only paid $15 to see it. Or it could be the best thing in their life and they're super excited about it and they walk away. But there has been times in the Fringe history where I've had the board be very adamant with me about raising ticket prices to X amount, because there's some shows that are small shows here in DC and the ticket price is $50 or $60. And like, unless you're like really dedicated, like, why are you paying that? I mean, just reality. It's also an environment where you have to go and be quiet and like not be on your phone. And it's just awkward. It's different than going to a concert or, that sort of more live performance environment.
That's part of our mission with Teens Behind the Scenes as well, as we offer free tickets to these touring Broadway productions for high school students, because our starting ticket price is not going to be affordable to your average high school student. And so I love that you have this mission of trying to make, theater accessible, both financially, but then also, you mentioned from the cultural perspective too. It's these kind of smaller, different venues. You said originally were you doing theater in like bars and stuff like that as well? You mentioned
when we started, we were downtown and we've been at established theaters for many years. We were at Woolly Mammoth, we've been at Arena Stage, we've been at Studio Theater, we've been at Gala Hispanic Theater. But coming back from the pandemic, we simply could not pay the fees. They had increased so much and there's no wiggle room. And it's like, it's kind of hard to like argue because I don't know everything about everyone's finances, but no one's doing well.
Right.
So we are, and we've always done vacant space. Like there's always vacant. So we primarily do 100% vacant space right now.
What does that mean, vacant space?
It means that I partner with a business improvement district, which there's numerous in the District of Columbia. So our current partnership is with the Georgetown Business Improvement District. And they have a person on staff that they have properties that are vacant, which if you're in any city, anywhere in the world, there's a lot of vacant retail space, right? So they help identify the spaces and then we build them out. So an example, last year we used an abandoned Washington Sports Club and we built theaters in the different exercise rooms. I'm really hoping that we get the Nike store. I think we're going to get the Nike store, which is 3 floors and we get to like light up the windows. So usually we get into the space a month before and we outfit the space and then we start techs the week the festival opens and go from there. So we have a storage space where we keep light and sound. And pre-COVID, we had like 80 or 90 platforms, but I had to minimize. So we now only have 12 platforms. And we also get really great partnerships with Metro Stage last year, let us use about 200 chairs, which was really great. And different theater artists allow us to use some equipment and stuff for the festival. But yeah, we use vacant space. We do have a rule though, and this rule comes from when the festival was founded, and we used a lot of crazy venues that were downtown that had been vacant since the Martin Luther King was killed and it was rats. We don't deal with rats anymore. We can't do it. Leaks. We don't deal with leaks anymore. It's too much. Those are the only 2 things that we draw the line at this stage.
That I think gives like a lot of insight into just all of the minutia and the little like you wouldn't think, oh yeah, you have to rent chairs, you have to, and platforms. Do you mean like those little platform stages that can get set up?
Well, we use wood platforms primarily.
Wow.
I know. I mean, we'll see what happens this year. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but a lot of it too is we build this, we build it out, which this last year, one of the great things that happened is one of our production people, he worked at Georgetown Visitation. And so a lot of their high school students actually came and helped build the festival. And then they served as understudy venue managers and box office staff, and then worked the festival. So it was a really fun experience to actually get like hands-on, like, no, we got to build this like now. We don't have another week. This is happening now. So it was a sort of fun experience for everybody.
That's awesome. Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you is just what kind of advice based off of your journey, and then also in, supporting through Fringe, all of these up and coming artists, is what advice you might give to high school students that are interested or are, kind of debating whether or not to pursue a career in the performing arts?
I mean, honestly, I think it's really hard. And I oftentimes find myself actually discouraging people from doing it, mainly because so much is driven towards being on Broadway, and a lot of universities and educational things have changed their curriculums where they've gotten rid of scenic design and a lot of the tech theater stuff, and they really just focus on making people Broadway performers, which is like how many people actually get that experience. So I think the best thing, if you're like into the performing arts, like you have found that it is your place, then you should do it for as long as you can, and realize that the most important thing about theater, whether it be you're a stage manager, you're an usher, you're an actor, you're trying to be a director, is that you're working within a community. Anything that you do in theater, you're working with other humans to get to that end goal. And the more that you can learn about those dynamics for as long as you can is going to help you in whatever it is that you actually end up doing, which it may be theater, it may be the performing arts, right? But it may not. And that's okay too. But it's really the skills, the interpersonal communication skills, and all of that. You cannot learn those things the way that you learn them working in theater anywhere else. And that is to me, that's the most valuable thing that I personally have gotten from theater, and that I see other people taking from theater, and either staying in theater because they got the right opportunities and were in the right place at the right time, or in what other careers focus that they may end up focusing on.
I think that's beautiful advice. Because I think we do have to be honest about how difficult it is. And it's definitely a choice. And I think there's lots of discernment you have to make for yourself of like, am I okay with, not having one job for longer than 2 years?
Yeah.
Or,
Well, and financially, it's also really, it's just not accessible. I mean, I think about just my journey, like with the way inflation, like if I was at the same point taking my apprenticeship in the year 2023, I'm not 100% sure I would be able to afford to do that because of where the economy is and where we've gotten, so it's like you have to think about, there's just so many different ways in and out of theater.
Yeah, and something I also want to encourage is that like your art form is valid even if it's not, paying your bills.
Yeah.
Because it's really difficult to make your art form pay your bills.
And with the festival, I went through a phase where I didn't want to call anyone in that was participating in the festival an artist. I don't know. It was a phase. But mainly because I didn't know that they all were artists, and that actually a lot of the purpose of the festival is about the freedom of expression and what that gives someone to be able to stand up on a stage, do the show that they've envisioned, and what that does for like their mental health and their strength in their own ideas and their ability to execute them. Sometimes that can really galvanize someone into amazing things. We're back to calling them artists. I called everyone participants for a long time because I was like, I don't know, maybe they're not artists. Like, you don't have to be an artist to do this,
Mm-hmm. That goes back, I think, to like the egalitarianism of what's behind the idea of Fringe. Yeah. You also mentioned, I think it sounds like a big part of your work is just community building. I'm getting a sense that that was a big part of your professional upbringing too, was like finding people and building community through theater. So how do you know? Is it a gut feeling? How do you find your people through?
It is a gut feeling. And sometimes the gut is off and you got to deal. Yeah, I'm actually, like, as we approach putting the festival together for 2023, I'm actually going back to a lot of the things that we did in the beginning, which, like, one year we did like a 9-month bar tour, because I don't know, that seemed like a good idea. But I'm going to kind of go back to having a lot more of gathering points for people, and not just concentrating everything around the festival. But a lot of it is about setting up things that are not always centered around the same thing. Like, if you're going to do a bar tour, you have to go to somewhere where the focus is not alcohol, right? Where everything is not focused around like things that, because some people are alcoholics and they're not going to be able to go to that, or if they do go, it's a problem. But really trying to always think about all of the different types of people that you want to feel comfortable at the festival, and like it's their place, and making sure that there's a comfortable level for everyone. One thing I have been struggling with are trigger warnings, and how, because during last year's festival, this woman reached out to me about a play that was about like immigrants coming to the US and had all sorts of stuff in it. And she was like, is there suicide in the show? And I don't know everything about every show. And I was like, I have no idea. So I emailed the producer, be like, is there suicide in your show? And she's like, no, but there's everything else. So I emailed the woman back to be like, there's no suicide. And we did have some shows that had, like, the artist had asked to have certain trigger warnings on it, but it's really challenging at a Fringe festival because like everything could be triggering to anyone for whatever reason. And so I'm trying to think about how to have a statement about that for the shows this year, because I know there's things for me that I don't want to see. Like, I don't need to see plays with car accidents in them. Not into it. But it's challenging because you don't want to have someone sitting in the house being like, if I would have known, I wouldn't have come. So that's something that we have to, which is very different than if you're like running a regional theater and you have 6 shows or 7 shows, you like know exactly what those things are and you have your page on your website. We have all these shows that we don't even know. We know a little bit, but we don't know everything about the show. So it's a little challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, like, do we leave it up to, the artist? But then
Yeah, I think we need to have like an overall statement that's like, I don't know. I don't want to be like at your own risk, but I don't know. Hopefully we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Do you have, are there anyone that you just kind of want to uplift as again, kind of along this theme of community, no art gets made in a silo, or like, and no nonprofit certainly gets made as in a silo individually. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's anyone you wanted to uplift as a mentor, or just someone that has really helped you with your professional and artistic journey.
Honestly, there's been so many people. Like, there's been from Amy and Terry at the Art and Theater Company, the Arden was really my first artistic home on the East Coast, and really learning about the staff culture there. Glenn, the TD, he's not the TD anymore there, but Glenn Perlman was like the best TD I've ever been around, like absolutely excellent in his execution of the hundreds, thousands of sets that he had to build there. Honestly, it's been a little challenging in DC doing Fringe, because a lot of the folks that I guess could be considered my peers often saw Fringe as competition. And so I did actually learn a lot about how to avoid those people. But along the way, there have been numerous folks in the community, like Edgar Doby at Arena Stage has been a great mentor to me over the years. Paul Tetros at Ford's Theater has also shared a lot of resources and been a great friend over the years. And I don't know, so many people, also people in the visual art community, like Transformer, Victoria at Transformer Gallery has been a great resource and friend and advice giver over the years. And many of our patrons, we have a lot of like long-term patrons that have been going for years that just send me messages. Let me tell you, they really get into like how everything works. And Fringe wouldn't be who we are without that. And many of the theater companies that started at Fringe, from Pointless Theater to Pinky Swear Productions to Dizzy Miss Lizzie and the Roadside Review, many of those artists who still work in the community are kind of our advocates, and also our judges, which is also a great thing to be able to have people in the community that care enough to tell you like, that's going great, or what are you doing? That's horrible. But yeah, Fringe is, because I really am the only employee and we have a lot of folks that work as contractors and stuff like that. So really we are, and myself, like all of us are always ripe for anyone giving us advice if they take the time to jot down their thoughts, because nothing we do is set in stone. It's always we morph and change every year.
I think some of the best artistic advice I ever received was to turn your competitors into your collaborators. So it's like, oh, I'm really jealous of like what they're doing over there. How can I, copy it? Or how can I, because I think copying is flattery. Or how can we make it our own over here? Or could we collaborate on a project? Could we, combine? What could we do with combined resources as opposed to viewing each other as competitors? Yeah.
My dream, and has been for many years with Fringe, is that when the festival happens, it actually happens at all the regional theaters, and the regional theaters make their stages available for free for the 2 weeks that we need them, and the artists do shows and we share resources. And it also highlights them to our audience and our followers and makes it more of a community. I do not know if that will ever happen. We're in year 18. But I think it would be a great thing for the community to have that kind of festival.
I love that dream. Well, and kind of speaking of that, I guess, is there anything you want to uplift as future projects, or anything you want to toot your own horn about for what's coming for Fringe? I know you have the festival this summer. Yep. So if there's anything folks should be thinking about or looking forward to for ways to get involved.
Yeah, we will. The festival tickets go on sale June 21st, which is the first day of summer. It's also my birthday. We've always had tickets on sale that day. It's my my little gift, my little birthday gift to myself to get all that work done. And then during the festival, like I said, we're going to have I'm calling it the community bar space, and it's going to be open on Friday and Saturdays. And there's no cost to go to it, and we're going to have a stage in there where I'm hoping to book comedians and musicians and really keep it a full roster of stuff going on. So even if you don't want to go to the festival, or you're like, I don't have time to do that, you can swing by the bar and check out that scene if you're into that. Once the festival concludes, which the festival goes July 13th through the 24th, and we will be doing an extension of the festival on July 28th and 29th for the shows that are selling well. But once the festival closes in the fall, we will be relaunching our pandemic program that we started called Down to Earth, which is a visual art program that is focused in the Ward 7 community and deals with the Kenilworth North Park that is getting rehabilitated by the federal government, which there was a dump there that started in the 1800s. But it really focuses on the climate crisis and its intersectionality with systemic racism, specifically in Ward 7. So that is those are 13-week paid residency periods where artists create new artwork based on those themes. So I'm really excited to be bringing that back. It's a little bit of a leap financially, but we can do it. And next year we're gonna continue to keep the festival sort of a smaller size until it really does seem really that the staff is comfortable with making it any bigger than it currently is, which is around 40 productions. So that's like 200 individual performances over the 8 days. So we'll see. We have so much learning to do as we progress with all of the things that are happening on the planet.
I think that's a great thing, though, to let our high school students know as well, that like even, folks with more established careers in the performing arts, we're still learning every day.
Yeah, it really, there is never a point where you stop. If you do stop learning, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And I also want to say, just because the target audience here is high school students. As a high school student, you can apply to be in the festival. We had a 17-year-old do a musical that she wrote during the pandemic. And honestly, she sold out every show and it was really great. And you can also work the festival, which we do have the jobs, the venue manager and the box office jobs on our website. If you go to the homepage, they're the first blog entry. And venue managers are paid $30 an hour. Doesn't matter if you're 17 or 16, doesn't matter. You're still going to get that. And box office is $25 an hour. So something to do in the summer, maybe.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, I will definitely be sure to share that information in the notes attached to this interview as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time. And I just, in closing, if there's anything else you wanted to offer up or mention, leave it to you.
I'm good. Thank you for your interest in Fringe and including us in your program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, you have like a wealth of information to share, I think, with our students. And I'm just excited about all the new theater that gets to happen in the district as a result of Fringe. So
yeah.